iPhone gaming? Pfft, who cares about that? We're going to talk about some old school Mac games today on.
No, no, no. We have a guest, Paul. We have guest.
Just because you're offended by it doesn't mean that he is.
That's true.
Oh shit. All right.
We still keep threatening to see if anybody can identify what song I'm trying to mouth sound out, but I'm going to stretch it out as long as I can. Welcome, everybody. Today, on Press B to Cancel, we have the great Sick Jake. Hi, Jake.
Hey, hi, Jake.
There we go. And then we have myself, Polsh109. Say hi, Polsh. And we also have a special guest, my friend, the computer nerd, Cloaked Alien from Twitch. Say hi, Cloaked.
Hi, Cloaked.
See, there we go. He's my unofficial husband, even though I think his wife's okay with it. It's okay.
Yeah, it's a little official.
Yeah. So today we're going to be talking about some old school Mac games, and I'm not talking Candy Crush on your phone or your iPad or your. We're not even going to go to the iMac. We're going to go way back. We're going to go to like the 80s and 90s, and we're going to talk about some of these things because I had a DOS computer. I had a 286. I don't even know what those numbers actually mean, but that was completely out of my wheelhouse, and I still loved it. But I had no experience with a Mac until pretty much around the time iMacs actually started coming out. So I thought that it would be cool for us to talk about this, and I wanted to bring Cloaked Alien in because nobody knows older computers better than me. Yeah, right. No, it's Cloaked. Cloaked is a very true fan of original hardware and computers in general, so I thought getting your input on this would be awesome. So thanks for joining us.
I'm today's pet nerd.
Yeah. I mean, you're a nerd like us every day, but today we get to put you on the pedestal.
The special nerd.
Yeah, this is great because again, like this is a gap that we definitely have. Like I didn't have a computer myself until I was 17, so the only exposure I had to Macs was in basically elementary school. So I know a little bit, but it's good to have somebody who's more knowledgeable about this.
I was probably 15 by the time I actually got to use a Mac, and I didn't know there was anything different. I thought a computer was a computer was a computer. So if it didn't say Tandy on it, I was like, what's that? So, Cloaked, where should we start, man? What's your earliest memory with any kind of Mac games, or even a Mac in general?
I don't know exactly when my first memory with the Mac was. I think like the old school Macs, the one in all, like the monitor and the hard drive and the floppy drive, everything integrated, like the original Macintosh.
Right, the black and white one.
Yeah, the black and white one, basically. I think I've seen those when I was like very young, but my earliest like proper memory was actually when I was a teenager, and my dad, he got a Macintosh SE30. It's actually one of those old black and white Macs, but also a very powerful, like for its time, computer.
I think that's the one with the 20 meg hard drive.
Yeah, something like that.
And it cost, I think, almost 4,000 US at the time, which is insane to me.
How much?
Like
Say
4K, like 3,900 for the
4K.
high-end one.
Oh, wow, man. That's amazing.
And I know that specific model came out like late 80s, but I'm pretty sure my dad didn't buy it new. He probably bought it like used for like a small amount of cash. So this would probably have been like, as I said, in my teens. I was born 1980, so I was in my teens like in 1993, so probably somewhere around that, like 93, 94 or something.
Right.
That computer was actually one of my first like proper experiences into computing, believe it or not. Like I me as a kind of a DOS guy, like retro PC stuff. But I got my first old PC in 1994. That was my first PC, like an XT class machine. It was very dated even then. So I actually had my first experiences with the Mac.
So when you first had the Mac, what were you using with it as a teen? Was it for schoolwork? Were you doing coding, or it was just games and mess around?
Yeah, this was actually before I knew any coding or anything. I learned that on the PC. So this was like, it wasn't my computer, it was my dad's computer. So whenever I was at his place, he showed me a bunch of games and I played them. And these were like black and white games, of course. And at least one of the games that stuck with me the most was Civilization. I had my first play of Civilization on a black and white Apple Macintosh. And my dad taught me how the game fundamentals worked, which is absolutely hilarious. So that's one of my fondest memory of the Macs for sure. Like Civilization, it actually works in black and white. Like, and you have to remember that for the people that don't know, that we're not talking like Game Boy shades of gray or something here. We're talking monochrome, black or white. So no shades, just patterns. And there was quite a bit of games that actually worked well in black and white. I kind of love the aesthetic to this day, actually.
Well, when I look at the graphic style, because it's not, you're right, it's black or white. It's one bit or whatever you call it.
Yeah.
But there's detail there in the graphics in these games.
Oh, yeah.
And it looks really great. And it reminds me of manga, right? Because manga has the tones and basically dithering effects to kind of get different colors or different shades. And you see a lot of dithering effects on old Mac games, and I love it.
Yeah, some of these games looked like black and white Atari games, and other ones looked just like stellar. I was like surprised, especially with some games that were 5 years older and looked like they were something you'd expect to see at the beginning of the life of that computer.
Like when I think of like Space Quest or Police Quest games on DOS, like obviously has the colors, but very pixelated, very chunky. But when I look at games on the Macintosh, even though they weren't in color, they're black and white. Something like Shadowgate, like the graphic fidelity is there. Like I really love to look at it.
Yeah, they were really like pushing what they could do. And that's like, I mean, that's something they do to this day, is pushing the hardware to its limits and seeing what they can get away with. And it's not even so much seeing what they can get away with, but seeing what they can change to make things work, like being clever with how they code it and stuff like that. Things that were all over my head until lately. And I'm like, oh, so that's how they did that? Oh, okay. But yeah, it's really cool to look back at these games, because there's a lot of indie games where people are throwing out game jams and, trying to beat something in or trying to throw a game out from start to finish in 4 hours, 24 hours, a week, a month, whatever the game jams are. Those ones, you see a lot of them coming out, and they look like old Mac games, and now I'm starting to appreciate them even more, because you basically have these simplified aesthetics, but at the same time, they're throwing in what they can purely because of the time restraint, and I'm just like, this feels like an evolution of just Mac stuff. And again, because this was something I had no experience with, it's really just opened my eyes to a whole different world of games that I had no idea existed. This and like Amiga and stuff like that, Commodore 64, I was aware of them, but I want to try these ones out now.
Yeah, the Mac, like the old school Macs, like the very early games, I don't remember what they were called, but they had a lot like simple pick up and play games in black and white, like with tanks that shooting people, or simple like I don't know if you ever played the game Mousetrap in Windows, where I think you're
right.
I think you're a mouse that's running around. You have to push blocks and contain cats or wherever. I can't remember exactly, but there was a game like that for the Mac called Beast. It was the same thing. It was a dude running around pushing blocks. You have to close off the ghost. It's like super simple, very fun to play. It was something that inspired me a lot when I learned how to code. So I did something like that in DOS, just like for kicks, because everything was so simple. So the early Mac games for me are like simple pick up and play games, like because they were so accessible. They were so easy to run, and like you didn't have to install them or anything. You can just copy them on a floppy and drag them to the desktop, and they're installed.
I think that was the great thing about the Macintosh, is that it was very, like you said, accessible, right? Very easy to use one. That's why, for me growing up, we had the Apple IIs in elementary school, But for high school, it was the Macintosh. And the reason they got a computer lab with them is because they're so easy to use, and the teacher didn't have to spend a lot of time setting things up.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I actually did our typing class was on a Mac. And my coding, my computer studies course, we had to use, I think it was Basic or Quick Basic on the Mac we had to use. So I remember coding Arkanoid, basically, a breaking game on that. And I loved it.
Oh, cool.
See, I never got to do any of that. We had these old, in elementary school, we had like these old Tandies that ran DOS, as far as I know, unless Tandy is a completely different thing. I just remember seeing those. And this is the age where, you know, every time you go into the computer lab, the first thing you have to do before you even turn the thing on is take off the dust shields. Right? So, but we never did any of that. Like early elementary school, the only things we do on PC or on computer. I'm just gonna say try not to say PC because I don't even know if it was a PC or not.
Well, PC compatible is what I kept hearing back then. It's PC compatible. It runs Windows.
Yeah, so we were basically just playing edutainment games. It was Reader Rabbit, it was Math Rabbit, and then we'd get time to play DuckTales because that was on there. So you know that's the earliest memories of computer stuff, and I never got to see a Mac until I was in grade 8 or 9, and my friend had one, and like I don't know, maybe it was an iMac, I can't remember, but my friend had one. And then when I started hanging out with him, I started hanging out with more of his friends. One guy, they had a Mac in every bedroom, and
What?
this is like a
Wow.
yeah, there was a family of 5, and there was a Mac in every bedroom.
That's
So
Wow.
but I mean, these are ones from the 80s too. Like I'm sure this guy got them for like, you know, like $100. But the one thing that stood out for Macs for me is that I didn't know, like it just seemed cryptic. It seemed like pure computer to me because there were no graphics. I was aware on how to get stuff working in DOS. You know, CD backslash or change directory, all this stuff. I used to understand those, but when it came to a Mac and seeing the mouse and stuff like that for the first time, I was like, what's this? So, and these guys were Mac nerds.
Yeah.
And they were like, Mac is supreme. This is way better. It can do everything your PC can do and more. And they actually knew how to use it, which is what I used to think about early Macs is like, if you were serious about working with computers, you usually had a Mac. If you didn't have both, you had a Mac first. And that's what I think of. So I think of people programming and figuring weird things out and stuff that I would have had no experience with as a kid. These are the ones that, like Jake was talking about, programming Arkanoid and stuff. I never did that. I just did keyboarding class. That was all we ever did.
That's funny though, because my impression is pretty much the other way around. Like, no, seriously, because like Macintosh, at least from my perspective, Macintosh was never a nerd computer. The people that used old school Macintosh were people that were into like graphic design, desktop publishing stuff, because the Macintosh was like superior for that. I know it's not game related, but like that's the way it was. That's probably also how I think a relative of mine was heavy into Macintosh. Because it was a computer, you didn't really have to be a nerd to use a Mac. It was intuitive, like from the most basic things to installing apps to uninstalling apps. You just drag them to the trash bin and empty it. It was like super simple. My dad could handle his Macintosh while drinking whiskey. That's how easy it was.
See, that I never got that idea.
Yeah. Like, I've never been an Apple fanboy. Like, I've always been a DOS Windows type of guy. I've never been much into Linux until recently, where I started running more servers and stuff. But I have come to appreciate old school Macintosh stuff more now. Because now I can see, like in hindsight, I can see, holy shit, they really did do lots of stuff, like, before their time.
Yeah.
Like simple networking stuff. Man, you had the local talk cables that you built into even older Macs. You can just put a cable between two computers, and you can have simple networking. the older Macs, they used SCSI, and SCSI is very compatible. You can take like a modern SCSI drive and slap some adapters on, and you can have an old school Mac use it. I have in my old Macintosh, which is coincidentally my dad's old SE30 Macintosh. I actually have it here at home.
It still works?
It still works. Actually, I had to have it refurbished because the battery blew up, which is also a very common thing with these old school Macs. So if you have an old school Mac, take out the battery very quickly because they literally explode.
Oh, that's wild.
Yeah, I had to send the motherboard of my Mac because it was my dad's old, and I have memories growing up with this. I figured, okay, I won't just replace it. I will send it over to a bunch of guys in the States. And it cost me a couple of $100 to have it repaired. But, I mean, I got my money's worth, so it works just fine.
Yeah, when I was looking at Macs, the thing I was reading was they were kind of giving that added bonus of, yes, it's expensive,
yeah,
but it has a built-in cooling fan, and this will last you 15 years. So, like, they kind of knew even then that they're guaranteeing how long this computer would last a family if you bought one.
Oh, yeah, this works. I mean, aside from normal electronic stuff, and the hard drive I have in it is like it's still not a modern drive, but it's an 8 gigabyte. I mean, as you said, these computers came with 20 megabytes of hard drive.
Yeah.
I have an 8 gigabyte hard drive, a SCSI hard drive that I took from a server. It has some weird connector like an SCA bus or whatever. And I have a simple adapter to it, and it just works. I used some software on it, and I have partitioned the drive, my 8 gigabyte drive. I mean, there's not enough software to even fill that drive, and I still have like the charm of having like a mechanical drive. Of course, there are crap loads of like these memory card solutions, like the SD2 SCSI boards that are out there that worked with everything that has SCSI support.
And like it was years of Windows people. Like if I never have to look at the driver window ever again, I could die happy, because I had so many issues with drivers and just stuff not working. Like the idea of plug and play, you're right. Like Mac was big for that.
Same thing when I did some reinstall and stuff. I needed to get some software on there. I could use my zip drive, which has a SCSI interface, connect it to my PC. I could copy over some stuff, and with a simple extension, it could read the DOS file system. So it was easy to like transfer files, even before I had networking on it. It's like it's hard to explain, but it really feels that the machine was way ahead of its time, despite being like a small black and white machine, with all the hardware interfaces and even with the software. I even had another computer, like a portable Mac before, that didn't have a network interface, but my old Mac SE30 did. So I could connect, like I could take a local talk cable, connect my laptop to my Macintosh SE30, and I just had to tick a few boxes, and suddenly my laptop was sharing internet connection or a network connection through my SE30. It was working as a gateway. And I remember doing like sharing connections and stuff like this in Windows. That was a real pain in the ass back in the day. It was super complex. And this just worked. It was so simple. With an operating system that's from, I mean, I'm using System 7 on it. It was released in early 90s. And like early 1991, what state was Windows in back then? It was
Windows networking is still a mess, and it's 2021. Like it's insane.
Yeah. No, but this is actually
2021. Shit.
Yeah.
I thought it was 2017, the forbidden year.
Indeed. No, I was watching a documentary recently about Macintosh, and they were interviewing some guy that was in like a Macintosh computer club, blah blah blah, and his argument in Apple versus Microsoft, he said that when using a Macintosh computer, you're feeling like you're the one in control and it does what you want to. When you're using a Windows computer, it makes you feel dumb because you don't understand what's happening. Like, it's hard to grasp what the dialogues mean and what you're doing wrong, etc. While a Mac is pretty straightforward, and I can actually subscribe a bit to that, even though I have my preference, and it's not like Apple stuff. Not then, not now.
It's kind of cool how much it has gone back and forth in the years, though, because like I think of DOS and Mac being just two different sides of the same coin.
Yeah.
People played games, they had the same uses, people had preferences, but then mid 90s, Windows 95 and stuff came out, PC started getting really popular, and that really blew up.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, like mid 2000s, early to mid 2000s, when like the MacBooks and stuff started coming out, those started taking over, and people were like, these are superior. And now it's just like, it seems for me, from like the circles that I'm in, it seems like, oh yeah, screw Macs. So it's like back and forth, and I'm wondering in 5 years, is Apple going to do the same thing and basically find something else that is going to take over the market instead of just releasing another iPhone every year?
Well, a lot of that drive is because of Steve Jobs, right? And he was the visionary with the marketing spin on things. So,
right, yeah, that's a good fact.
Like the place I'm working at, I've been working at the same place for a long time. It's almost 20 years now, and I've known both my bosses for a long time. And when I was visiting the company in, I think it was mid 90s, they were pretty much only using Macintosh computers, like Power PC, like early 90s era stuff, and they only had one PC computer. It was a 486. It was in the corner of the office, and it had the marquee screensaver saying, I wish I was a Macintosh. They only had it for like some very specific use cases, and they weren't doing any programming stuff or anything. They were doing like desktop publishing stuff, image processing, like Photoshop has its roots like on the Macintosh. My first experience with Photoshop was in black and white on my dad's old SE30, like Photoshop 2 or whatever. Like,
oh, I didn't realize it was that far back.
It's so far. Yeah, I've been like doing pixel art in Photoshop, like black and white icons for the Mac. Oh, that's another thing I remember. That's pretty damn cool with the Macintosh. Even in the older system, like System 7, if you want to put a custom icon on a folder or a file or whatever, if you pull up properties on any file, you can just click on the icon and you can copy it or you can paste over it from whatever you have in your clipboard, which I thought was amazing. Like, oh, I want to have a cool folder on a cool icon on my personal folder on my dad's computer. Then I can just go to his icon collection and just copy whichever icon I wanted to have on my folder. It was like ridiculous easy, and it was charming, and it made it more personal.
I remember that now. I remember that because because what would happen is kids in our class would edit the icons with, dick and tits, as kids would do, and the teacher would notice and get pissed off. I remember he used to walk around to make sure we weren't doing that kind of stuff, because that was neat. I just remember that. That's hilarious.
Yeah, all I'm thinking now is like Windows 95 versus Windows 98. I remember Windows 98, you could have like a gradient going from like the top of your window bar to the other side, and that was the coolest thing. So that's why Windows 98 was superior in my head. So
yeah, but Mac had the pair of eyes in the top of the screen and followed your cursor.
Only if you installed it. It's the eyeballs extension. It's not default. You have to install it.
I swear everyone I use had it.
Oh yeah.
just because they all went out of their way to install it.
Oh yeah, that's how I remember what it's called, because it wasn't a long time ago. I did my research to make sure I installed it on my Mac.
All right, so since we're talking about installing stuff, what kind of games were you installing? What kind of things? Because
okay,
I don't know many games. One thing I wanted to bring up is the Mac Venture games, because that's something that was blowing my mind. Is Shadowgate is one of my favorite Nintendo games. And even though I've never beat it on Nintendo, I've only beaten it on PC. But the music and stuff stuck out. Anyways, what did you play? What did you remember playing?
Well, I never played the Mac Venture games on Macintosh, actually. I had my first experience with those on NES. But I had, like I was talking about before, like Civilization was one of the first games I played on my dad's black and white Macintosh. Another game he had, which was freaking amazing, was actually Chuck Yeager's Air Combat. It was one of those like flight sims, air combat sims.
On a Mac?
Yeah, on a Mac. 3D and everything, but in black and white with dithering, of course.
Really?
Freaking amazing. I love that game. One thing you have to remember, that the SE30 actually has a Motorola 68K030 processor running at 16 megahertz. That's actually faster than an Amiga 1200. So it had quite a bit of processing power. It was not a slow computer by any means.
Right.
And to think, I thought Motorola didn't show up until cell phones were invented and started becoming common. So wow.
Yeah. But Chuck Yeager's Air Combat, it didn't run at like the highest frame rate, or you could actually remove some effects, like you could lower the detail, you could remove clouds, etc. But it was, for me, it was pretty mind blowing to play this on a black and white Macintosh, and it was actually quite fun. You had to do some dogfighting, you had to practice landing, etc. So while it wasn't really a flight simulator, it was like it is one of those games I played quite a bit on DOS after I moved forward. Like this, okay, this is a cool game. I love this game. I played it like after the Macintosh.
That's wild that the Mac can do something like that. I didn't realize it was doing that kind of level of graphics.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
I've always been impressed with the Macintosh's graphics, like we were saying earlier, but that's wild.
It's actually a powerful machine. And I think I played Railroad Tycoon,
Right.
which it is an older game, so that ran fine.
I heard that there was SimCity was on Macintosh as well.
Oh yeah, the first version. I'm not a big fan of that though, because my person SimCity for me, like the first version of SimCity, I played it on the Super Nintendo, so that's
Right.
very, very more enjoyable. I always felt like the original SimCity was kind of boring because I was spoiled with the Super Nintendo version. I think, yeah,
Super Nintendo hype.
Super Nintendo hype all the way. No, but I played Prince of Persia. You played on the black and white Macintosh.
I think it was a Mac original, originally.
Oh, maybe it was.
Yeah.
I think so too.
And what else did I play?
I used to I played Prince of Persia on DOS. I used to have that on my PC. But like the difference for between what I've seen of the Mac version and what I've seen of the DOS version, it basically looks like they just added color to the same exact game to me. Like I haven't gone like side by side, but I just remember it's like as soon as you see it, hey, that's Prince of Persia, and that was it. And I'm just like the same angles, the same kind of motion. Like you realize it's like, okay, I bet you this plays just like it. So it's cool to see these games that I've grown up with realize that, oh, they probably were on Mac first, or they were at least on a computer before I played them on like NES or Super Nintendo. Or
There was one game when I was doing research on Dark Castle, which came on the Mac first in '86. It's a interesting platformer. It's got some odd choices of graphics, but it's a neat like puzzly platformer on Mac. And there was ports on other systems. There's actually a Genesis port of it. So somebody actually took a Macintosh black and white platformer and reported it to the Genesis. EA, I think, did this one. But all they did, when you look at them side by side, they took the original graphics and just redrew them. But it's got this exact same style, it just colorized, and it looks better on the Mac than it does on the Genesis, because they didn't really take advantage of the Genesis, right?
Yeah. My dad didn't only have the SE30. He actually got a little bit later on. He got one of those. It's a little bit of a later model, that not one of those self-contained models, but it had a separate monitor and stuff. I think it was the 2 SI. Pretty much just a little faster, but with a color monitor. So then I got to play some more games that weren't just black and white.
I think Battle Chess was on that one.
Oh, I never played that.
I think that's the one I had, yeah.
I did play SimCity 2000 on it.
Okay.
That's my first experience with SimCity 2000. I played a crap load of SimCity 2000 on that machine. Because even if the Mac SE30 was a powerful machine, a lot of games still required color, and of course that doesn't work on a monochrome screen. So
Right.
there was a lot of games I didn't get to experience until the 2SI. SimCity 2000 being one of them. Spectre VR, if you ever seen that, it's like a vector wireframe tank shoot 'em up game, sort of futuristic.
I don't think I've heard of that one. I love that. It's like the early 3D gaming in a way, which is interesting.
Yeah, cyber-ish. And Pirates Gold.
Oh, that's one of my favorite games. Although I played the Genesis version the most, but I love Pirates Gold.
Oh yeah, and there was actually a pinball game that I really enjoyed. It was called Crystal Caliburn. I played that like crazy as well. And I think you can still buy it or something weird. They have it for sale on their website. It's super weird. I really enjoyed that game. For the most part, I stuck to like the classic games I really enjoyed. I never played Dark Castle actually because we didn't have it back then.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of the games I snuck and got a chance to play. Like, I feel bad, but the game I played the most in high school was Glider, where you're a paper airplane and you're just going from one side of the screen to the other. And I love that game.
Yeah.
But it's such a simple thing. But there's so much better stuff on there. Like Chuck Yeager, like a flight simulator. I didn't even know that existed. It's amazing.
And Chuck Yeager, that was actually from Electronic Arts, I think.
Oh, that fits, yeah.
And there was I played a bunch of like point and click adventure games. I don't remember the titles, but the games like that always stuck with me are still stick with me to these days. Of course, like Civilization and SimCity games. That's what I considered my roots.
Well, point and click, that's why it's interesting you didn't play the MacVenture games, because no, so Shadowgate for the NES is the one I played, and mostly I like it for the NES because of the soundtrack. But you go back to the Mac version where it originally released, I want to say 88, I could be wrong, 87. I took notes. But it came out on the Mac first, no music. Like a lot of Mac games have no music. It's just sound effects. But when you look at the ending of the game, like the last sequence, I don't want to spoil it if that's a thing for a 30-year-old game. But you look at the ending in the Shadowgate on the Mac versus Amiga, which came out a year later, and the NES, Mac looks really great. It still holds up.
Yeah, it looks oddly good considering it's all like essentially black and white, but they did colorize it.
And the inventory system was amazing because you're using the mouse to move your inventory, so you have a bag.
Yep.
And you're dragging and dropping icons. It feels very much like you're working on a desktop, and you're dragging the stuff to your inventory. Whereas in the NES, you're using a list. It's awkward.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the thing with lots of old school Mac games. Like I didn't know about the MacVenture games back then. I think that's basically why I didn't play them. We didn't have them. If I had access to Shadowgates and stuff like that, I would most definitely have played it on my dad's SE30. Like no doubt about it. But I think the UI, like the basic Mac UI, lots of games used it, and it was actually amazing for the games that used it. Even Civilization used the standard UI. Like the game feel was like a window, and some other things were just windows in it. It certainly gave it a special feel, which was good rather than just using custom stuff.
According to I've got Shadowgate Mac Adventure version, and according to Steam, it came out in 2015.
Oh, they released it on Steam, like the black and white one?
Yeah. Yep.
That's wild.
It's hilarious, man. I gotta say, because I was just like, oh shit, I didn't even know, because they remade Shadowgate and like just did a digital like updated version, and it's they have a point where you can just set it back to the original soundtrack from NES too. So I was just like, oh yes. Wow. But I was just like, I didn't know about the MacVenture series, and then so they have like Deja Vu, Shadowgate, I think the Uninvited. So basically all these ones that you'd see on Nintendo that are basically the only point and click games that I really had any experience with as a kid, they were all originally on Macs. So I thought that was cool. And that's part of the reason why I wanted to talk about this, because we have all these experiences with Nintendo stuff, and I didn't even know that they came from somewhere else first. So I like seeing where like things springboard off. I had one of those, what do you call it? One of those bootleg 31-in-1 cards that you get, for NES. And it was one of those ones that doubled as like the Famicom too. So like it had the adapter so it would work. And I never realized there's games like Karateka and stuff like that I didn't know. I just thought they were these unapproved, unauthorized Nintendo games, that just didn't have that Nintendo stamp of approval on them. But a lot of them were just ports of Mac games that I had no idea until I was actually doing research on this week. So it was kind of cool to see. It's mind-blowing to me, I gotta say. It's just this and Amiga and Commodore 64 are three things that I want to check out more. And anybody who likes retro gaming, vintage gaming, whatever you want to call it, I think it's cool to experiment with it. Go back to the roots, like Cloaked said, and where your roots are, probably based off of something else. So go back a step further and see what inspired these games, because some of them, they'll really impress you. They've impressed the hell out of me.
Yeah, it's never too late to pick up older stuff, whether it be Commodore 64 or Amiga, or in this case, like old school Macintosh stuff. I mean, there's I have my experience, but there's so much stuff I missed. Like, I had no idea the Mac Venture games were on the Mac back then. This is something I learned like a few years ago, actually, because I played Shadowgate on NES, and I had no clue because, well, I simply didn't have access to it. I'm glad I got to experience what I experienced back in the day, but I also appreciate that I can go back and experience, especially now that I have the real hardware, of course, but that's not necessary. There are lots of great emulators out there, so you can absolutely fire up an old school Mac emulator and play Dark Castle. I mean, why not?
Well, one of the reasons why I love the Mister so much, and I never bought it for this, but PC emulation that does, or the hardware simulation that does. Like, there's the Mini-Mig core on the Mister, and it's a great way to play Amiga games, and I got a whole pack of hundreds of titles I've never even heard of. So I'm really digging the Amiga stuff, and I'm pretty sure there's a Mac core. I have to set it up. But yeah, when I got the Mister, it was all consoles. I didn't realize such a gap in my gaming history, I guess, of games I could have played.
Yeah, that would be super cool.
All right, there's two games I want to ask about for you, Cloak, just in case you've played them.
All right.
And so one is from 1985 by Ann Arbor Softworks. It's called Grid Wars. Have you heard of it or played it?
Ooh, I don't think I have.
Okay. Because this one, I like the premise of it, is what caught my eye, is because you're going to a bar, you're in a bar in space. So just think of like the cantina from Star Wars. I'm like, this is perfect, because like, what year did the original Star Wars movie come out? That's like late 70s somewhere?
Yeah, 77, I think.
Yeah, so this is 1985, and like the first thing I thought of is, this is like the cantina in Star Wars. All these like random aliens that like I'm not talking little green men. I'm talking just like weird. One dude's a big furry thing. The other thing's like a fish man. Like this all over the place, all in black and white. And the goal of the game is basically you're at a bar and you want to drink, but you can't drink until you beat everybody at this one game in the bar called Grid Wars. So it's kind of meta. So the game is actually a game within the game.
Wow.
And it's just like this. It's like a simple, almost like a Gradius or Galaga thing. You have to shoot the oncoming things and prevent stuff from coming at you, like a lot of games were in that time. But I just thought it was really cool because the artwork was really neat. And this was after me researching and seeing, what's the first game that you were talking about? It was the tank one where you have to shoot the mortars and take the tanks before they get to you.
Yeah.
And that looked like Atari, like a Bonsai or something like that, or I can't remember.
Yeah, that sounds familiar.
Yeah, so it's like I was thinking all these old games that have basically black and white versions of Atari, that's what I was thinking. And then I saw the Grid Wars and I was like, what the hell? Like that stuck out to me. That was like, I didn't realize how good the graphics could be for something literally black and white, no shades of gray. So I was like, this is amazing to me. But there's one other one I want to ask you about. If you haven't played Grid Wars, we can't talk about that. Nop. Have you played Nop?
No, I don't think I have.
So who made that one, Paulsh?
I'll tell you in a second, but I want to describe Nop. So Nop is basically a 2D version of volleyball. All right, so they have the volleyball rules, but it's really okay. Fuck it, I'm not even gonna get this out. I can't do it. It's Pong backwards. It's GNOP apostrophe. That's Nop, and this is made in 1990 by Bungie. If anybody knows Bungie, if you're an Xbox fan, you know what Bungie made.
Yeah.
And this was apparently their first game was basically a Pong knockoff, and they spelled it backwards, and they just changed the rules up a little bit. So I just thought that was hilarious. That was what they did on a Mac. So
yeah, I did not know that. I know that Bungie made, and this was a huge exclusive. Bungie made, that was later. It required a faster color computer. They made Marathon.
Right.
FPS like Doom, but more fancy. It had more features and such.
And a fun one too. I played a little bit of it at a friend's place, but Marathon was always the game they said, see, Mac is better.
Yeah, absolutely. That's
Yeah.
that's how it got presented to me. I think my dad's relative or friend showed me like, "Hey, look at this. This is much cooler than your Wolfenstein," and stuff like that. And I was like, "Yeah, this is cool, but I don't own a Mac."
I think the earliest memory, like I said, where my friends had the Macs, the first time I'm pretty sure it was on an iMac because it was all that self-contained thing except for the keyboard. I think the only time I ever saw this game was on Mac was MDK in the 90s. And my friend was just like blown away by it. He was showing it off, and this was where I first experienced that. See, Mac is better because he was explaining how you'd like zoom in with a sniper rifle from over a mile away and stuff like that to take somebody out. It's like GoldenEye, you can't do this on GoldenEye.
Man, IMAX. So just a side thing. The only thing I remember from IMAX, so the high school I went to, they basically they put in a movie. Detroit Rock City was filmed at my old high school. And the money the school made from that being a location, they used it to buy IMAX for almost every classroom. That's how much they made off that movie.
Wow.
And
Wow.
all I remember is computer studies class. We're sitting at the IMAX, and those things didn't have floppy drives. It was CD drives. So we had, but we're so used to doing all the work on floppy disks before on the old Macs. So the teacher had a portable floppy drive, and he had to go to station to station to station so we could load our assignments onto the computer every class. That's my exposure to IMAX.
Nice.
Yeah, I remember thinking that was weird too. Like, no floppy drive? Holy crap, that's my whole life.
Well, they really pushed the envelope on hardware, right? Like,
Oh, yeah,
from,
yeah.
You know,
I mean, it's not like they totally made away by floppy drives. You could still buy a USB floppy drive for it. And the iMacs, like, these are newer machines. This is the G3 iMacs. They had USB and FireWire, which was very much before its time.
oh yeah, FireWire is amazing technology.
Yeah, and also USB, of course. But that
Yeah.
also means, like, even with the older, like I said, you have SCSI on the old Macintosh computers. And then you have later on, you have with the iMacs, you have USB, and they are severely dated machines, but you can still, they are accessible, like with modern peripherals. It's kind of cool.
Actually, it's neat because my wife's cousin, she has a much later model Mac, iMac. I'm trying to think, it was 2015, I think it was. And she asked me to see if I could get it working again. And I was worried about stuff not being compatible or not be able to do anything with it. But sure enough, USB key, 50, 60 gigs big, works no problem on the iMac. Things I looked up just worked just like a charm. The only headache I had is to get the latest version of Mac on it that I could. Had to have the App Store installed. There's that weird jump when Mac went to an App Store format, and that was the headache. But hardware-wise, it was great. Anything I plugged into it, keyboards, mice, worked just fine. Like, I was really impressed with what Apple does there.
That same Mac actually made an appearance in the last episode we released. So that was in the not the VR episode, in the PlayStation Classic one, because that's when you were working on that when we were recording that. So you hear if you listen carefully in that episode, you can hear that bong.
Right, because I was updating it. That's wild.
By the way, to backtrack a little bit regarding like old black and white Macintoshes and graphics quality, one thing worth noting is I think the standard resolution of an old Macintosh is 512 by 384.
That's pretty big, actually.
Yeah, which is pretty much a high resolution. If you compare to like DOS games and Amiga games, I think most resolutions were around 320 by 200 and stuff like that. At least the standard resolution in DOS, like VGA 256 colors. So it was a pretty high resolution, and in a lot of games they actually made the monochrome look good with good dithering.
Yes.
I think for pictures there's a modern game. It's called Return of the Obra Dinn.
Oh, I've seen some of that.
Yeah. It uses, I think it's that algorithm. It was an old algorithm they used to convert color pictures to monochrome. It's called the Atkinson algorithm, I think.
Okay.
I think the game uses that. So it renders everything in monochrome using that algorithm in real time.
It's a really cool modern take on a retro style of graphics for sure. The black and white.
Yeah, and I love it. I think it's amazing.
I just wanted to mention, too, for anybody who's wondering what the hell dithering is, I think the easiest way for me to explain it to anybody who doesn't know is kind of like stippling when you're shading stuff in art class with the dots as opposed to, actually shading with a brush stroke. So it's just like dot, 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 dot. It's like the digital version of that. I think that's a easy way to explain it.
Yeah, color reduction, basically.
Right. So you don't have the colors, but you basically use like shading to change it, and the dithering kind of gives it this more depth. So
yeah.
Anyway, sorry to cut you off there. I just wanted to get that out because otherwise I'd probably forget for next time. So.
Thinking back, it's kind of bad that like I played some really cool like point and click adventure games on the newer Macintosh, like in color. Some of those would probably have worked very well in black and white with an algorithm like that. So it's a shame they didn't support it, because the Macintosh could probably handle it performance-wise.
Yeah, like the chips and the CPU inside was fine. It was just a limitation of the color palette, really.
Yeah.
But it's still interesting that you take, like you said, the high res considering screen of the Mac and put it side by side with Nintendo. Like, Nintendo is not that detailed on its graphics, not like the Mac was. It just has colors. For input on the Mac, was there ever controllers, or was it just strictly mouse and keyboard?
There was. I was never exposed to it back in the day. However, I was exposed to it a few days ago. I was watching an online auction. Apparently, the Gravis gamepad, it's like a classic.
Classic, yeah.
Yeah, it was released for the Macintosh.
Okay.
I had one of those.
Yeah, it has, like the old school Macintosh, it didn't use USB, of course. It had a proprietary connection for mouse and keyboard called ADB, and I think the gamepads use the same connector. So you could use there was a good, because you could pretty much chain devices. That was the cool thing with the old school Macs. You could connect the keyboard to one of the ADB ports, and then you can connect your mouse to either the other port or the extension port in your keyboard. So you could probably chain a lot of devices.
Yeah, the Mac keyboard was a thing of beauty, that thing. And I remember the extra port on it.
Yeah. And the power on button, at least on more modern, I'm not it doesn't work on the SE30 because that has like a rocker switch. But the more modern ones, you can turn them on with the power button on the keyboard.
I would smash that thing in anger while playing a game. I'll tell you that right now.
Oh, yeah. And I'm lucky, actually. As I said, I have my dad's old SE30 here. It's refurbished. I also have his old 2SI computer. It's not refurbished and it's not in use, but I do have it. I have a little bit more modern Quadra 700 Macintosh that I used to play, like, not modern, but like newer games in color. And since it has an adapter, like old school Macs that supported external monitors, they didn't, of course, use VGA. They used some proprietary crap. But there are adapters, and I have an adapter for it so that I connect a VGA monitor and, or in my case, a capture card, so I can capture output from it. Which is amazing, because I have access to everything. I can play, if I want to play SimCity 2000 and Civilization in color, I can do so.
Show off.
Well, the one thing I was looking at was, so we said like they like pushing the envelope on hardware, and they really aggressively pushed CD-ROM drives, and Myst was originally released on Mac first, right? And they really took full advantage of the CD format for all that video and audio. So I always found it really interesting there. I'm trying to remember when Myst came out. Myst was ended late 90s or mid 90s.
I think it was mid.
Yeah.
It's, according to my Mind Palace, the initial release date, September 24th, 1993.
Really? 93? So...
Yeah, that sounds about right. Because I remember, I haven't played Myst, but I remember hearing about it in my teens.
That's actually another game I think I was introduced to on Mac. My friend was saying it, but he was really heavy into MDK, and that was older than MDK, obviously.
Oh, yeah.
So he was trying to show off the newest stuff. But yeah, I think we got it covered, man. I think we're doing pretty good here. Sounds like Cloak can entertain us with hardware talk and stuff like that for hours, because it's usually what we do in streams anyways. I just ask him questions.
I actually have a fun fact. I have a friend of mine that he's very into Macintosh computer. He's the one that provided me with my Quadra 700. And I provided him with another SE30 machine. He told me, and I didn't know that this was just a few years ago, that around, I think it was early 90s or something, Apple actually made their first Unix-based operating system. They made an operating system called AUX. This was way before Mac OS X. So this is actually an operating system. It looks like the old Mac OS 7 or System 7, but it has a Unix core. And I think they were targeting like government stuff and other institutions that had the computers were required to be up to certain standards. So this was an experiment to target like government contracts and stuff. So he told me about this, and he actually got me to install it on my SE30. So I have AUX running on it. I can easily switch between it. I have absolutely no use for it, other than the fact that you can boot it up and you have a Unix prompt and like you can compile Unix programs on it and whatever. It's not very useful, but there are some diehard fans out there. I didn't know about this, so I think this was actually Apple's first experiments with using a Unix-based system way before OS X came out.
Well, that's like OS X was. You're talking like 10 years before OS X, at least, right? That is wild.
AUX is 1988.
Oh, so it's that early. Okay.
Okay. All right. It's still really cool, though.
Yeah, very, very cool. No, so you can actually... It was like a combination of a Unix system and the graphical interface of System 7. It did have... It wasn't very compatible. I think only a few programs actually... Like a standard Mac OS programs actually worked. I have tried it myself with a few games and it just crashes. Some work, some others don't. So I don't recommend running it, aside from like the fun of it. But it's still very interesting that they actually started down that path fairly early, although it was just a sidetrack back then.
Well, like thinking outside the box is definitely Apple's trademark, I think, right? I mean, lately it's all the marketing spin, the external side of things, but they've always tried pushing new hardware or, new operating systems or taking advantage of Unix earlier. Like they definitely tried to push the envelope on certain areas.
Yeah, you can certainly see... I mean, some things I've started to realize just the latest few years, like, for example, the iPhone. Now we're talking, like, very modern stuff, but the iPhone is a good example of giving the people what they want, not what they're asking for.
Right.
Because the iPhone is obviously a success. Now every phone looks like an iPhone, so you can't really argue with that. But if you start to go backwards from there, they pretty much have been doing the same thing. At least during the time Steve Jobs was in charge. They were doing things... They were basically telling people what they wanted. They were giving people what they wanted before they knew it. They didn't do what people asked for. They would just provide them. Okay, this is what you need, this is what you want. And people, for the most part, just agreed with it.
I mean, they're geniuses for that. I got to say, I'm not a Mac guy, but
yeah,
they've nailed. That's a science for them,
yeah.
And it's impressive to see.
Well, when Jobs came on board with Apple, so the Mac at the time they had, I think, a few dozen models of Macs, and when Jobs came in, one of the things he pushed for was to reduce it from dozens of models to like 4 or 5, to try and reduce the scope for manufacturing, I guess, but also just to tell people, here's your options. It's less. It's easier to kind of get into.
And you don't have to be an Apple guy to appreciate the brilliance. Like dating back to the 80s when it was just Steve Jobs and Wozniak, like in the beginning of it all, figuring out the graphical user interface when DOS and CP/M and whatever and Unix systems were the standard, like text-based terminals. For how much I love text-based terminals, I gotta appreciate what the Macintosh did.
Yeah, it opens things up to a whole different audience. Like, it makes it easier, more accessible. And I think that's why Windows took off as well, too, because I understood DOS at the time. I was like, as a younger kid, I can't remember much about it now. But going to Windows, it felt really easy. And if I had any time with the Mac, I'm sure I would have figured it out. But, I mean, That's back when I was experimenting and playing around, see what I could do, see what kind of games I could play. Now it's more like, how do I check my videos and watch my videos, and basically just like, okay, how do I check Facebook? Sadly.
All right, good stuff.
I think, yeah, we'll have to call it quits here. Maybe talk some more Mac stuff again, maybe later Mac, and see how it's evolved. Because I love making fun of the Mac users for games because that's always the meme. It's like, you know, I want a gaming PC, or I want a gaming computer, and you ask for a MacBook. Those memes are timeless to me. So, but I mean, my friend used to play World of Warcraft with us on a Mac, and it, you know, other than him just being really shitty DPS, there was no issues.
I certainly have my gaming roots on the old school black and white Macintosh. I have no shame in admitting that. I started out my love for video games. Well, I deepened my love for video games on old school Macs, for sure.
Well, we probably cut our teeth and probably our fingertips on these old computers that had the dust covers, so it's all fair. I mean, we've earned it. It's okay. Kids don't know how easy they got it, blah, 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 blah. I'm waiting. I should insert an okay boomer in there. But, yeah, no, this has been great, man. Cloak, thank you for hanging out with us. And you want to tell anybody listening where they can find more of you?
Well, thank you so much for having me. Yes, you can certainly find me at twitch.tv/cloakedalien, and you can take it from there.
Cool, thank you. And, yeah, you can find me as well on twitch.tv/Palsh109. That's PALSH109. And I believe Jake's been streaming, so we gotta keep him going.
Yeah, 3 times in 1 week. Look at me go.
Wow.
Then nothing for the last week. I blame Cyber Shadow for making me salty. But yeah, you can find me at twitch.tv or over on Twitter. Sick Jake. No Kane sick.
Awesome. And for anybody else who's still listening, thank you for listening. Thank you for supporting us. And if you want to go the extra mile, we do have the Patreon going. So it's just that little extra. But check it out at patreon.com/pressbtocancel. So anybody who's interested, check it out. We have a monthly post there for movies, and yeah, hope to hear from you guys again soon. So again, thanks, Cloaked, and hope to hear from you again soon. Special thanks for music go to Arthur the Last Ancient on Spotify or The Last Ancient on Bandcamp. For more episodes, please visit our website at pressbtocancel.com. And also, feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and check us out on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and Patreon. As always, thank you. This has been
Press B to cancel.